Just a Job is the podcast for the modern woman to redefine what success looks like. We highlight real women and their real stories.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Just a Job. Happy Monday. Before we jump into Sam's episode, we're going to start with our stand-up. And Ellen gave me a brief introduction. She said she is, quote, foaming at the mouth, unquote. So with that, Ellen, share the good news.
What a gorgeous visual that is. I now am considering my word choices a little bit more carefully. Okay, a couple of funny notes. I just saw this on LinkedIn and I think this is so funny, but CrowdStrike is hiring for a social media manager, senior social media manager, and they're willing to pay them $200K because they're in the toilet. And I think that's so funny. And someone took a screenshot of it and reposted and was like, now they need us. Now they need help. And I thought that was funny. Okay, this is what I think is hysterical. So this past week, I have been collecting. Actually, hang on. Let me back up here for a second. Okay. There are levels of corporate speak, right? You've got the typical circle back, take this offline, piggyback, low-hanging fruit. And then there's like maybe another echelon of truly ick, like double click, for example. And Intuit is on an echelon in which I didn't even know existed. And I started writing these things down. I kind of gave a little sprinkle last week of the cross-pollination meetings.
Yeah, yuck.
And it's gotten worse. And I think it's now that I've realized like the language, the different language that people speak there, I like can't not hear it now whenever I'm in a meeting. And so I have a couple of things I have to share because they're just so weird. So it's like their own names for things. So not only is it corporate jargon, but then they have different names for normal things. So for example, they call a meeting an op mech, which is short for operational mechanism. That's the first one, which is okay. In presentations, they have things called big rocks and paper cuts.
Oh,
very consulty. Let's see. Oh, and a shadowing session. They call it a follow me home, which is a little creepy.
Ooh.
The cross-pollination, I said, this is the one that I think is so bizarre. So if you are in a meeting where you're talking about a very specific process or you're redoing something, like you're in a working type of session or you have a Slack channel or a group chat that is very nitty-gritty in the weeds of something that you're talking about, they call that sausage making. Isn't that disgusting? And I was in a workshop this past week.
You should say, I'm a vegan.
It's so weird. I was in a workshop this past week where it was a sausage making workshop. And the amount of times that they said that, I was like, I need to leave. I need to go touch some grass and have the sunshine hit my face because
just visuals of that. Making? The visuals of sausage making. I'm like, in my head, I see somebody who's like churning minced meat.
Like, ew. Oh, just
come on. There's better ways to do this.
It's so gross. Like, God damn. Can we just say what it is? It's a working session. Like
that needs to be somebody's job, is literally to completely overhaul corporate language within a company.
I'm telling you, it is another language on top of normal corporate jargon. It's just so funny to me. I'm like, this is all made up. This is all made up. None of this makes any sense. Oh my God. So that was my funny story. The other piece of news that I saw that we kind of talked about last week was coffee badging, where people go into the office to scan, literally get a coffee, scan to say, I'm here, I made it to the office, and then go home. Amazon is cracking down on coffee badging, and you now have to stay at the office for 2 to 6 hours to be officially compliant. So not only are they now monitoring your badging, they're now looking at the time stamps that you are there to be compliant, a hybrid employee.
next
The
time
world is ending.
I was gonna say, next time you order something from Amazon, just think about all the little people in their little cubicles that are monitoring. They're like literally getting paid to tell people that they didn't stay at the office long enough. Just remember that.
Just like a little tear.
So
So dumb. My other notes. Everyone needs to go, the company, ClickUp. They have a TikTok that is hilarious. They're doing all of these like parody songs, but as if your HR was giving them, and they're hysterical. So go check that out at
Okay,
some point.
I'll
They're
note
really
it.
funny. And then the Olympics are starting. I have a deep passion for the Olympics. I can't wait to watch that on my TV 24/7. I have the opening games on in the background right now. I'm
Yep.
so excited for the Olympics. So I have a new like pep in my step for the Olympics coming up.
Do you, as a project manager, I was going to text you today because I was starting to watch some of the opening ceremonies, and I was like, how many project managers, how many production crew, how many people, how many minds, hands did it take to make this happen? I'm like, nothing. I can't enjoy anything anymore being a project manager because I look at the complete product and I'm like, well, when did they start this? How many people had to be in a kickoff call for this?
Oh my God, 100%. I thought of that twice recently. One, I feel really bad for the PM whose role it was to clean up the Sen because yikes. And then the other one I thought of was we were driving to Santa Barbara last weekend and there was a push notification that came through on Google Maps to say like there is a speed trap or something in the road. And
Mm-hmm.
this, all I thought of was, oh, who's the PM for Google Maps and specifically the push notifications? And then
Mm-hmm.
what was all of the criteria and requirements that went in for how many push notifications? What was the mileage criteria? And I'm like, can I just drive in the car and not
I
have to
know.
think about these kinds
Does
of
the mind
things?
ever stop, Ellen? No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. That's enough blabbing from me. Sarah, give us your stand
Ooh.
up and tell us about your new job.
Job is great, guys. Job, new energy, new person over here. I am very happy.
We can feel it. We can
Um,
see it. Amazing.
Thank you. And with that, I was telling Ellen I needed to get a new desk chair. I was using one of our like dining room chairs as a desk chair. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. So now I've got a swivelly chair and I feel like official.
Ooh,
And
ergonomic.
the arms lift up so I can sit. There's lumbar support. It rolls, except I can't really roll it on my floor. But now I have shoulder pads, is what it looks like.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're official.
Oh my God. But yeah, office chairs. I'm like, you want $600 for an office chair? Like,
It's a very niche market for sure.
there's so much money in it. Okay, I have three things. Well, that was one thing actually. I watched Office Space last night with Michael. It's a movie from the 90s. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You would recognize the cover of it. It's like a figure with a bunch of sticky notes, like a person, a body figure with a bunch of sticky notes on it. Like you've definitely seen it at a Blockbuster or like a family video store. But anyways, it was this guy who was like working at a desk job and he hated his life. Like it was just existential dread every day. He said every day was the worst day of his life. And then he was hypnotized and then he like all of a sudden just stopped caring. And when it became the scene where he just kind of stopped caring, I was like, was that just a job before just a job?
Cool.
So that, which makes me think of another thing. I was watching the news the other day and Melinda Gates, I can't remember if it was a podcast or she was doing an article. I think it's a podcast where she's interviewing women about big moments in their career and their career journeys. And I was like, Miss Melinda Gates, I'm going to sue you.
She must have seen us and been like, that's a good idea. These
I
girls
know,
are
I
successful. Let me
know.
rip it off.
We were watching the news with Michael and I was just like, oh boy.
Wait a second. That looks familiar.
I'm going to call in. I'm going to call into the Gates Foundation. And then the last thing, it's a question, but also too, we can talk about it. Did you see the Ballerina Farms Time article? Did you read it?
Yes. I didn't read the whole thing. I skimmed it. Yikes. That's my response.
Yeah. Yeah. It was one of those things where I was like, where's this going? And then I was like, oh, whoa. Because I always thought like, yeah, she's so revered as this, like can do it all woman. And then she kind of the whoever wrote it was incredible. Kind of started to sprinkle in throughout, like, I can't get a minute with her without her kids or her husband. Like, she's talked about how sick she gets, like all of these things where you're just like, it's screaming help, you know. It was just one of those pieces where I was like, this is an example of um women's dreams not being allowed to come to fruition. And I think it's important to say, like, we cannot pass judgment. We don't know this woman. We don't know what her passions are. But the article, I think, was one of those, definitely, like, in general, not just specific to her, but like looking at women in your life and looking at things that they've had to do or things that they've had to sacrifice. It was just very interesting. I was like, whoa, that was
100%. On the surface, it's very much she gave up her life because of the request, maybe, of someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's sad. And too, then I went down a TikTok rabbit hole and I was like, now that I have this lens, let me rewatch and see what I think. Because I loved watching before of like homemade bread. Like, I love watching people make homemade bread.
Yeah, or like
TikTok.
cooking in a cute farm kitchen.
Yeah.
And that's just like
Turning
life in general. Yeah, you just like look at it and you're like, wow, that's pretty and cute. And then scroll, I'll just go to the next one.
Right.
You don't really know the whole picture, the whole life. So
it's very interesting. Taking the internet by storm, people have like insane things to say about it too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely struck a chord with a lot of people. But
I like that we kept it PG. Very nice.
Yeah. We have our opinions if you can't tell. But anyways, everyone, enjoy your Monday. We're going to jump into Sam's episode. So fun to talk with her and hear her story. And she was just like a ball of energy. And I just remember feeling like light and bubbly after our conversation. So we hope you enjoy. Have a good week, and we'll see you over there. Hey everybody, welcome back to Just a Job. Today we have Samantha Shih with us. She is a CEO and founder with a background in fashion and fashion retail. Her career spans consulting, owning, and successfully selling her business to now a chief brand officer of a fashion AI platform. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor.
Oh, absolutely. We were just talking beforehand. We're so excited to hear about your background. Of the two of us, Ellen is the fashionista, so I feel like she'll have a ton of questions.
Thanks, Sarah.
Truly. She'll have a ton of questions, but we are so excited to hear about your background, how we came to meet, again, now tapping into LinkedIn. If you see somebody, reach out to them, which is exactly what Samantha did. She saw her friend Allison on the podcast and realized that she wanted to share her story. And we're so excited that you did that. So thank you for being here.
And I love that episode with Allison. So I'm so glad to. And it's just funny because when you have friends who are doing interesting things, you don't really learn all like the little nitty gritty details of like how they became the successful person. Like you never hear that story because you're hearing about their personal lives or like their kids or whatever. So I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. It's like getting a deeper friendship, looking at your friend in a different lens. It's interesting.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Especially as business owners and, successful brand officers. It's like, you want to talk about other things, but we're excited to focus in on your career. Ellen, you were going to ask a question.
I was ready to get into it. I was going to say, like, one, the AI, like, I'm running some AI projects now, so I have a huge interest in that. And then the fashion element on top of it, I'm like foaming at the mouth over here. I'm very excited. But before we get into all of the exciting recent stuff, we're going to take it back just a little bit. Samantha, when you were growing up, what did you want to be?
So I have always been into fashion. I used to play dress up with my Barbie dolls. I used to like make them outfits with little scraps of paper. And then I even had this idea of inventing this machine, which would just like pop out, whatever design that you had in your head instantaneously. They still haven't invented it, but I'm very hopeful.
Like in Clueless, that's what I'm picturing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the closest is probably like a 3D printer, but if you've ever seen a 3D printer, it's like printing your clothes. It takes a while.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, when you invent that,
Yeah.
And you make millions of dollars.
Yeah,
Ellen
sure.
and I will be little silent investors.
Yes,
Excellent. I
please.
can't wait.
Okay, that I love that you have always wanted to be in fashion in some way. What was it like making the transition? You spoke a little bit about like moving to the US. Like talk us through, you know, kind of that like young adult transition and following that passion for
Yeah,
fashion.
absolutely. So, if you're from an Asian family, there are only a few paths to success, and being in fashion is probably not one of them. Um, I was an East Asian Studies and Political Science major only because I had like some interest in both areas, but I really liked being creative and I liked fashion, but I wasn't like, I don't, I can't draw. I can't
Mm.
paint. I'm not like an actual like physical painter, doer, artist. So going to art school was definitely not in the cards for me, but I did love like taking art history classes. And I once like just sort of bounced the idea off, being an art history major with my mom. And she was like, absolutely no. So she was like, no, she's like, don't do that. But I'm really glad that she kind of talked me out of it because I was more interested in law and less interested in like actually like being an art historian or like an academic.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was like, okay, maybe I'll take the LSAT, which I did terribly at. And I'm actually also glad because I would have made a really terrible lawyer. I'm just much better at like bigger picture kind of concepts and like really down in the weeds of, reading contracts and things like that. So I would not have been a really good lawyer.
That
Okay.
is hilarious. How many um thought they wanted to be lawyers, take the LSAT, then they're like, no, 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 this isn't it. How many have we had,
Yes.
Ellen?
I was gonna say, like, I think you're probably the fourth person that
Mm-hmm.
said that, and I'm kind of it really interesting to have that, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, you think of lawyer and you think of like successful, powerful, you make a lot of money, and then when you really get down to the roots of it and you're like, never mind, this isn't really what I want to do.
Yeah, I just was never good at like it was like these questions on the LSAT and you're like, okay, no, I just give up. So I
Yeah.
didn't I was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But it's totally fine because then I ended up like applying to a few like consulting in jobs when I left or when I was in my senior year. And I will tell you that I think I have this like naive confidence about myself. Not that like I feel cocky about myself and my abilities. It's more just like when I go into a new project or go into a new job, I want to do it with full force and full enthusiasm.
Mhm.
And so when I applied to all these consulting internships, I was so not prepared for work. I had read like a few like how to interview for consulting jobs books and somehow like aced the interview and ended up getting a job offer. Um, but in my business analyst class of like 5 people, 3 were business majors. One was from like a chemical engineering major from Georgia Tech. And I will tell you that I will tell you the little secret. I hadn't opened up like PowerPoint until I got to my job. Actually, no, sorry. I opened it once when I was in college when my boyfriend at the time asked me, like, he made this presentation of like these really cute cats and like these Persian kittens. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best presentation ever. I didn't even make it. He just made it. I just watched it. So that was my experience with PowerPoint prior to work.
Okay,
Oh,
that is like the
love that.
epitome of fake it till you make it. Like you just
Mm-hmm.
well,
You
it's also
figure it out.
it's advantageous that you don't know to where you're like, I'm just gonna try anything and see what works. And it did. It landed you a job, right?
Yeah, I mean that first year I cried a lot because I just like
Mm-hmm.
Relatable.
I was like fumbling through kind of like figuring out all of like the Microsoft business tools and like using new business frameworks. And then on top of that, you have to like learn how to deliver presentations to like the CEO or even like conduct interviews with employees, and if you've ever watched like Office Space, a lot of what consultants do is, they're like, so what do you do here exactly? And, it's like code for your position may not be
Yep.
here after. So it's just like, it was just a year of real struggle.
Oh my God. We talk about it all the time because like my year after graduation was like one of the most like tumultuous experiences of my life. And I'm like, I wouldn't wish that upon my enemy, but there's so much that you're trying to learn and consume and just be that it's so you're just like it's almost like you're like rebirthed into this like baby and you're like an adolescent in the adult world. And to think like I think that everybody for the first 22 years of your life, you know exactly like what you're capable of and people are coaching you and everything's good. And then you get into your first role and you don't know how to use tools and you don't even know what an acronym is that stands for something that's supposed to be really important to your job. And you're just like, who signed me up for this? Why did I sign myself up for this?
I know. I feel like there needs to be a transition period between like the summer, between like your first job where you're just like, okay, I'm going to pretend that I have a job and I'm going to pretend that I can like manage my own calendar and, just like have pretend case studies that you can work on. I don't know. But yeah,
It is.
that would have been so helpful.
Like learning an industry, it's like it's a whole time transition. I mean, you're learning how to play with the big dogs and you're not at school anymore and you're not getting a grade at the end of it. You're just hoping to get a promotion or just get a paycheck. I mean, it's kind of that like sink or swim mentality, which is so different from school. And that transition is just weird. And everyone goes through it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because like every single meeting that I would have that was scheduled with my manager, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the day that he's going to fire me. Like,
this is it.
They have like way bigger fish to fry and you're just like, please don't give me the boot today. Like I need this. Exactly. You're so right though, Samantha. I've always thought, we've talked about this with a few other guests, like if there was to be some sort of company that was like a 3-month internship program that is just about life or completely unrelated to your major, where it's the 3-month post-grad kind of just like trial. You just get to like taste what life is like, experience what life is like, fail safely. That would be a really good, I don't even think it's a business idea. Like be like summer camp for adults. Entry level adults.
The question is whether or not people would want to leave that safe space. Like after the 3 months, they're like, oh no, thank you. I don't like the real world.
How do I go back to summer camp?
No kidding.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you're a consultant. How was that experience and did something either push you out or pull you out?
So as I said, I finally, after like a year, kind of figured my way figured my way through like consulting. But like I was saying before, I'm a little bit on the creative side. So I don't think that like consulting was a great match for me. Plus, my consulting schedule was 3, 4, 5, which meant that you were 3 or 4 days on the road and then the 5th day in your home office. And so that lifestyle when you're young is great, but I didn't see a lot of like managers, senior managers, partners who are women, because I think that that's like it's like a challenge to sort of be on the road for that long and having a family. So I didn't want to do that long term, but I'm like really, really super grateful that I had that experience, because if not, I don't think that like it would have, I feel like my opening up a business would have been so much more difficult if I hadn't had that background. So I feel like it's just, intuitively I knew that I wanted to leave consulting after a couple of years. And actually in most cases, consulting, you work 3 years, then you go to business school or you do something, you go to more school, and then you come back to consulting, which I didn't want to do.
I feel like everyone struggles with what do you want to do when you grow up? But at least you're able to look at the experience that you do have and know what you don't like and can kind of start filtering out industries or titles or areas of focus as you go forward, which it kind of sounds like that's what you were doing as you were going along your consulting journey as well. So what was the next step for you after consulting?
So I made, so this was back in 2007. I was just finishing up a program at Johns Hopkins. It was a joint venture in China. So I spent a couple years in China after I had done some consulting. And I made a list of like all of the things that I wanted in my next job because I knew I was coming back to Boston. So the requirements were that I wanted to live in Boston. It had to be a creative or a creative business. And then it needed to, like, I wanted to be able to travel on my company's dime back to Asia or to, so I could like selfishly like see my parents and like hang out with them and see my friends at home. And I didn't want to pay for that myself. So I was like, okay, those are the 3 requirements. I'm going to find a job. But then 2008, the financial crisis happened and there were like so few jobs. All of my friends were getting, laid off from their, from their positions. And so it was just like a really tough sort of environment to go and find a job for yourself. And then also if you had like real needs or desires, it was just like a much smaller pool. And so I looked at what I wanted and I really basically was like, okay, I'm just going to make myself a job. And back in China, I was making all these custom clothes with these local tailors at a fraction of the price that you would get here. And I was like, this might be something if I could just like make custom clothes in China and then import them into Boston. I think that there's something here. And so that's what I did. And that's how I came up with Night Tailors.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I think I especially love being able to like have that connection where you're maintaining your personal relationship to your Asian background and being able to like work with people there and being able to continue to have that relationship, but blend it with your life in Boston. What was it like, those first 6 months? Because it's one of those things where it's like you have this idea and you're really excited about it and then jumping into it and you're like, oh my God, there's so much admin work. And you the idea starts to like lose its sparkle a little bit. What was it like for like the first 6 months? And then when did you start to kind of like catch your stride and really get into it?
Yeah, actually, what's funny is that the first 6 months, my parents were like, okay, when are you going to launch this website? When are you going to like make some money? They were really concerned that I was spending too much time, like, doing photo shoots or like, designing the clothes and not enough with the actual practical like sales and, income generation. And so it's a good thing that they did that because if you're just, I think entrepreneurs kind of get stuck in the idea phase too much. And what they need to do is they need to have an idea, but then test the idea. So it's like a constant iteration of like test, product, test, product, test, product, so that they can really find something that like the market is really looking for. And so if you're an entrepreneur, that's the best thing my best advice is that even if you have like kind of a half sort of thought out idea, it's better to test it out first, see if the market responds. And then if it doesn't, then you know what tweaks to make. Mm-hmm. So.
Right. It's like Sarah and I talked about that too when we were like thinking about starting the podcast of like, okay, what's good enough? What can we put out that we're proud of that doesn't have to be this beautiful, perfect, shiny, perfect product? What can we put out that is good enough? And then we can make adjustments and move from there. So that's great advice. I really like that. During those 6 months, you're going through your, as I throw my microphone across the room. You're going through your creative process, photo shoots. I imagine like you're really starting to get the creative juices flowing. And for you, I'm sure that was really enjoyable and rewarding. Mm-hmm. What did like launch officially look like? What were those feelings and experiences like leading up to actual launch day? Talk us through what that was like.
Yeah, so I can't remember what day we launched, but we launched in August of 2008, and I was so nervous to put this product out there, as you can imagine, because you're basically putting your heart and soul out to the world, just sort of like what you're doing in your podcast. And then you're just hoping that people will like it. And you're like, please like it. But luckily, like in the very beginning, because this concept of custom clothing was so new, we actually ended up getting a lot of really great press. So the Boston Globe put out an article about us, and then I think even, oh gosh, I think that they're no longer in business, but like the Boston Post, like they put something out in the and so that those first days of getting like great press, and then like just getting traffic onto the site, and that was just very validating to me, I thought. And so that kind of kept me going to like the next month. And then pretty soon we had like a little cohort of like customers who really needed and wanted this product. And originally my concept was just to do this purely online, but I am such a people person. I'm quite extroverted, and I just realized that like just a pure online transaction where you're like, okay, just buy, I just need a shirt and then just leave the site, that wasn't enough for me and wasn't fulfilling for me. And so I decided that I would open up like a retail store. But again, like if you've ever had to lease a commercial space, you have to lease it for 3 years. You have to pay like 3 or 6 months in advance of like, rent. And so it's just like a really daunting sort of proposition for many new business owners. But we were able to kind of get cobble together some money and then, lease a space pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that sounds like such an exciting transition, because I feel like with the retail space, I mean, especially now, it's like primarily online, but to have the experience of like going into the store and physically feeling the product and looking at it and touching it and like trying it on or speaking with the person about it, it is such an experience. When you first opened the shop, like were there any experiences that just stuck out to you where you're like, damn, I've made it, like this is amazing? Just like especially in working with people, like there's such a satisfaction that comes with it when you're able to like provide a customer or a person with an experience.
This is a good and a bad thing. So I think pretty early on, maybe like a year or two after we had started, I got a message from a sports manager, and they were interested in me in dressing one of their players. But this player was so sweet. He's just like a really, really nice guy. And he was like up for us to dress him however we wanted. And
Cool.
he was just so open to like our ideas and concepts. And we ended up dressing him for a couple like Super Bowls. And then he ended up referring a bunch of other players, like from the Colts to like the Patriots. And so I had this like growing number of like athletes that I was dressing. And that was really fun because that was not like the normal, like, oh, I need a job for my, to go to Corton, which wasn't that exciting to me. But like, oh, I'm going to the Super Bowl. Okay, that's something interesting and different.
That sounds like so much fun. Okay, quick side story. I, for whatever reason, decided that on TikTok this past year, I would review Travis Kelce's outfits. And it's become a huge passion of mine. So much so that people would message me and be like, when is your review on Travis's outfit coming out?
That's amazing.
This literally sounds like a dream job for me. I'm so jealous. That's so cool.
I mean, I wasn't married at the time. It was like so amazing to see, like they were just so handsome and just so nice. Yeah.
It's like playing dress up.
Yeah.
And like looking is free, that sounds fabulous.
Yeah. The thing with men though, which is a little bit different from dressing women, is that men are just so open to your opinions about like how to dress and how to be. And I don't know, maybe it's because they grew up with moms who dress them. And so now they're like, just, okay,
Just
like
do
I
it.
can accept.
Just help me.
Yeah, I can accept your help. But women are more guarded, I would say. They're more guarded.
Yeah, particular. And although there's some men, I'm sure, that were very particular.
Oh, yes. I had many clients who were like that too.
Which, I mean, I guess in that same vein, like working with people does come with its challenges. I can imagine like customer service, especially because clothes are such a way to show off your personality and like dealing with all the different clients. What were some of the growing pains that you experienced while owning the business?
So I think that one of the things that I regret not doing is um, not setting enough boundaries for myself, because I'm one of those people that if a client messages me and is like, can you meet at like Sunday at 7 p.m.? And I'm like, even though we're closed, I'm like, yes, I will do it. And so setting boundaries is still I feel like it's still a skill that I need to learn. And not saying no, I think is really, really difficult for me to
Mm-hmm.
do. So I think that's the number one thing. And then the second thing is that as an entrepreneur, or as a young entrepreneur, when I started, I was only like 27 at the time. And so I didn't think enough about what my exit strategy was going to be. Like, what was it going
Mm.
to look like when I decide to leave this business? Or do I want to sell? Do I want to, just keep going until forever? Or do I want to give this business to my son? These are things that like I wish I had thought more about, because that the end goal of what your business looks like helps to map out all of the steps in between. And I think that that is something that I didn't do enough of.
Mm.
Interesting.
We, yeah, I'm thinking of, we had Kellyanne on the podcast, and we have at the time of recording this, we have not launched it, but she started a business and was able to sell it, and now helps founders with kind of that transition and that journey. And it wasn't until like talking with her that it dawned on me, like with entrepreneurs, like what's the end goal? Like,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
are you working to, continue to like iterate and grow and grow and grow and grow, but like you have to retire at some point, or you have to get tired of being,
Mm-hmm.
the main person in charge. And so that is like an interesting thing to think about. So that's a good piece of advice for anyone out there that is thinking about starting or is in the early stages of starting, or people who are even 10, 15, 20 years into it. Like what is the end goal? Because when you have that idea, it's like you just want to create.
Mm-hmm.
You don't
Mm-hmm.
go into an idea of like, okay, I want to sell this for however much, or have this goal, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
So
Right.
I can understand. But you're perfectly teeing us up. At what point did you kind of come to that, okay, ready for the transition? I'm either going to leave this business, sell this business. What was that time period like? And then the transition into your next role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had my son in 2017, and I was working these like crazy hours that, because if you're in retail, if you've ever worked retail, you're like on your feet. It's like every day is like so different and so busy. And I was working like 6 days. I only had Sundays off, basically. And I wanted more time with my son because he was little, and the time is so precious, and it goes by so fast. So I wanted to spend more time with him. And so at that point I started thinking like, okay, I don't know if this, and I was also fast approaching 40 at that point. So I was like, okay, maybe do I want to do this for the rest of my career? I
Mm-hmm.
could, but I don't know if I want to.
Mm.
But as I started thinking about my next steps, the pandemic hit, which was like
Hmm.
the worst time. I mean, I guess it could be like considered like the best time or the worst time, but it was really like just a difficult time period for every small business owner. We shut down our business, and so we couldn't really like serve our clients. I had a full staff that I was, really determined to keep on payroll as long as I had the cash. And then I had my tailors to really worry about. And so it was just like, I was just in survival mode for 2 years. And then in 2021, it's so funny when you put something out in the universe, like, I think I'm ready for a something, or like, I'm ready for a change, and you verbalize it out loud. What ended up happening was in 2021, my brother just so happened to say to me, like, my former boss has invested in this fashion startup, and they're based in China, and they're looking to just talk to people in fashion. Would you be interested in having a conversation with them? I said, Yeah, absolutely. I love talking to people. So it was a great time for me to like chat with them because I was starting to think like, okay, maybe I need to do something new. And I found out that they wanted a social media manager, which I am not an expert in. But I was like, okay, maybe after a few like intro calls and like informal conversations, I was like, so I want to throw my name in the hat for social media manager, but I'd only dabbled in social media just like a tiny bit, through my own, through Nine Tailors. And so luckily the founder really had the foresight to be like, you're not an expert in social media managing, but I would love for you to just write up your own like job description. So he gave me a ton of flexibility. So you know, I came up with like a whole page of like things I wanted to do. And he's like, you're hired. And that was it.
Oh, that is so cool. What a
Dream.
dream to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah. I can't tell you like how lucky I feel to be, um, to have had that opportunity because not everyone is going to have those types of opportunities come knocking on their door, be like, okay, just create your dream job and then we'll open up a space for you. So I feel so lucky about it.
Yeah, I
Mm.
mean, that's also the epitome of always take the phone call, always say yes to talk to the person who's interested
Mm-hmm.
or recommends you because you never know what opportunities it could lead you to.
Right. And a connection that my brother had about 25 years ago led to a job that I have now. It's crazy how the universe
Mm-hmm.
works.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love those kind of stories, like the whole like butterfly effect. Um, and like, oh, if you take this path, if you take this path, and then also too to have like your brother intertwined into the story and like be the original one to create that connection. It makes me think this is not related to work whatsoever, but always I've always wanted to be the reason why somebody gets married. Like I want to like make the
Oh, yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
So then at
Mm-hmm.
the wedding they can be like, "Thank you, Sarah, for introducing us." And I'd be like, "You're welcome." But maybe I need to take weddings and marriage out of the equation and think about like connecting somebody to a job or to an opportunity. Maybe that's what it is instead.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like knowing that you're going to transition out of owning a business to stepping back into like the employee role? Were there any sort of challenges that you faced while making that
Yeah.
transition?
So funny that you mentioned that because most people have like, okay, I'm going to work 10 years and then I'm going to strike out on my own. And I kind of have like a really backwards way of, sort of getting to where I need to go. So the transition was weird. It was so weird because the company that hired me, LookSky, they knew that I was like, I had a business that I owned, and they knew that I was in the process of selling the business, but I couldn't tell any of my employees that I was selling
Mm.
and that I had a new job. And so my boss was like, okay, we'll give you like 6 months to transition because sales take quite a long time. And also just like to buffer in a little bit of like, if the sale falls through, we need to find a new buyer. And so for the first 6 months of my of joining LookSky, I was working two jobs. So I was working my day job at Nine Tailors, and then I was working nighttime for LookSky because they're on Asia hours. So I was like doing these two things, and I was like, it's great that I'm getting paid with both from both jobs, but I'm so stressed. But I loved every minute of it. It was a little weird because I had to keep so many secrets to myself.
Mm.
And since Nine Tailors was like such a big part of my professional career, my I feel like my identity is tied to Nine Tailors, and so leaving it was very emotional. And then my last day at Nine Tailors, we just sort of announced that we had like I had sold the business to a colleague of ours, and that was my last day. It was like very abrupt.
Oh,
Whoa.
it's like saying goodbye to your baby, you know? And like you
Really.
said, like your identity is tied up in it and you put years of blood, sweat, and tears into a business and you have built relationships with your staff. And I can't even imagine how like And had to have like an abrupt sale like that to where you weren't probably allowed to say anything until that, the ink is dry on the paper. Like what a quick, for you, it wasn't quick, but with,
Mm-hmm.
with everyone else, it was that like you flip a switch almost. That's
Yeah.
gotta be really tough. Yeah. So you make the transition. The announcement is made. You're full time now onto Look
Hmm.
Sky. What was the first couple of, I'll say, months now
Hmm.
being with them exclusively? What was that transition like?
It was it was completely different because I'm the only employee in the US. The rest of my team is in Asia. And
Mhm.
so learning how to work remotely like 100% of the time was such an adjustment, especially since I'm so extroverted that I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, at the end of the day, my son and my husband would come home and I'm like, I need to talk to you, please. I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to somebody.
I need
Um,
interaction.
yeah, I need just human interaction. So I've learned to like navigate like those extroverted tendencies that I have, like, grabbing coffee with like old colleagues or friends during the week, just so that it like gets me out of the house, one. But
Mhm.
then now, also the second thing, which is I have somebody to talk to.
Mm. Yeah.
The other thing too is that I don't know if either of you have ever worked for a Chinese owned company or like colleagues from a completely, I mean, I am Chinese, so, but I've never worked for a Chinese company before. And that managing those cultural differences, I think, was also really interesting. So last year, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I was like, not just, it was just like an emotional time for me, but
Mm-hmm.
then also I wasn't sure how my company or my team or my boss would react to me taking time off for like surgery or, just because it's not the norm to have like, a very warm and fuzzy sort of like health benefits
Mhm.
in China. I don't know if that's the case, but so I was very nervous that I was going to get laid off, and there would be no legal recourse for me here because I'm not, it's not an American company.
Mhm.
And I was terrified to tell them, but I was like, it's better to tell them than not to tell them. And so I
Mm-hmm.
ended up telling them, and I'm starting to get a little emotional about it, but their response was so heartwarming. As soon as I told my boss, he was like, Sam, take as much time as you want. Like, you don't,
Mhm.
he's like, just stop today. Just don't do any more work. He's like, you need to rest, you need to recuperate, you need to do your treatment and everything. And they sent me this like beautiful handwritten card. Like, each of the people
Mm.
in their office like sent me a handwritten note. And so it just was an amazing reaction to something that was totally unexpected.
Oh my
Mm.
gosh. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping
Thank
that you're
you.
in recovery now as well. But we talk a lot about like knowing when a company is a cultural fit for you. And in your example, my dad has worked for Asian companies his entire career, and he has primarily worked for Japanese companies. And he's explained the cultural differences, even so much so like the hierarchy of how people sit in meetings. I mean, it's fascinating to me. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I can only imagine that being a woman and also having this diagnosis and knowing quite literally you could lose your job over that, like what an emotional experience. And then you're also fighting for your life at the same time, and
Mm-hmm.
then having that like relief when your company supports you in a way that you never thought that they would. I mean, talk about a place that you want to work for the foreseeable future. I mean, having that kind of support from your company, especially when it comes in that form, I think is so, unfortunately, I do think it's kind of rare, but I think it's something that should be celebrated, and I think should happen more often.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I think it's I just go back to how lucky I it has been for me to find a company that allowed me to create my own job, allowed me, to just have the creative freedom to design this new AI platform. And then, when I told them such bad news that they embraced it, they didn't push me away, which has been amazing.
It's how it should be.
Yeah.
Really, like, just be human, right?
Right.
Exactly. I was gonna say it's like it comes down to that human element. Like if they didn't meet you that way, I'm sure you would have made your way out of there. And that's just me making assumptions, but it's one of those things to like have that expectation and have that stress built out, and then to pop the bubble and have the bubble be like filled with confetti, to be like, thank God you understand me and like you hear me, because you want to be there, right? Like you want to give your all to this job and like you want to show up, and you'd expect the relationship to be two-sided in sense. And it's nice that you were able to be met with that. As Ellen mentioned, thank you for sharing that, and we hope that you were doing well. Making the transition after taking time for yourself and like having that experience of dealing with such a emotional and quite scary experience, like transitioning back into work, was that difficult, or like what was that like for you?
Well, I would say that last year was just like such a roller coaster of emotions, not just because like of my cancer diagnosis and then going through treatment, but then also at work, they decided that they were going to pivot from their clothing brand to this AI platform. And I wasn't really sure if they were going to invite me along to this next pivot, because I was like, well, I'm not an AI expert. Like, what can I bring to the table? And so the stress of like worrying about my health and also my job, and then it really impacted my relationships with like my parents. Like, they came and spent like 2 months with me just so that they could like cook and clean and do all the like the daily things that I wasn't able to do. And then it affected my relationship with like my son and my husband. And I just realized like towards the end of last year, like how I think I was just depressed. I was just depressed and I was overwhelmed with all of these emotions. And I didn't have time to really, I didn't really have time to, I guess, understand how I was feeling, because each day through my cancer treatment, I was just like, I just need to get through this day. I need to get through this day. I just need to get through the week, And so it was like really just that step by step process for me. And so I didn't have time to really think about like how I was feeling.
Survival mode.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it changed your perspective on so many aspects of your life. And I really appreciate how candid you are, because I think it's going through any kind of hardship, regardless of how severe or insignificant potentially it could be. People just don't like to talk about that kind of stuff. So I appreciate you sharing your struggle and your up and down kind of relationship with work, and then
Mhm.
with your diagnosis as well. So talk to us about their decision to go on the AI route. They obviously took you along. And
Yeah.
did your role change? Did you just kind of make a couple of tweaks here and there? What does that look like now?
So my role is largely the same. So I oversee all of their social media, their communications, the all the look and feel, and then what else? The marketing of their AI platform. So largely, I would say that those roles never changed, but it is like a totally different way of thinking about a brand, because I'm much more used to marketing a brand as a clothing brand. It has a story, it has a mission, it has a certain look and feel that you're very familiar with in terms of like D2C type of like, you think of like Everlane or like Bonobos. There's just like that well-crafted story. With a platform, there isn't that like touchy feely sort of like emotional element, although it can be, but it's just different. So I've had to like relearn how to market a platform versus like marketing a brand.
Mm-hmm.
Good transition, I imagine. probably one where you're like, this is a lot, but I'm coming out stronger. I'm coming out better. Especially in like such a uncharted territory, not just for yourself, but I feel like for the world,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like this is revolutionary.
Yeah, I mean, I thought to myself, like, at the end of the day, if I've spent like 6 months working in AI, it would be like I would be in a better position just like from marketing myself to potential employers. And so I was like, I'm just going to take the deep dive and go into AI and just see what happens. And I'm really glad that I did. I'm learning a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Were you familiar with AI previously? Like, did you use ChatGPT or anything, or did you go in like for better, for more or less like you went in blind?
No, I had used ChatGPT when it first came out because I was like, I had heard about it on the podcast, The Daily,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, huh. I was like, so they made a poem that sounded like Shakespeare. I need to try this. And so I was like a little bit familiar, but I can't really tell you like all like the technology that is involved in building this. I just can't.
It's so
Yeah.
I like that you said that it will market yourself really well, because I've started kind of thinking about how I'm working on some AI projects now, and like I've used Chat GPT and learned like bits and pieces, and like
Mhm.
you, I don't know the technical aspect behind it, maybe some, but I think it's interesting the marketing yourself aspect, because it's kind of like I feel like this kind of technology is you need to get on board on the train, otherwise you're going to get left behind when it comes to what the future of work is going to look like. So I find it interesting that it's like this new shiny object. Like people don't really quite know what it is, but they want to learn more about it. But they want to also have that on their resume so that if they go somewhere else, it's this, like golden token that you have as well. I had a question and I just totally lost it. My brain totally
But
just went
I
blank.
agree. I think that one of the things about I think in terms of like marketing yourself like as somebody who has worked in AI is really, really important because every single company, startup to established business, they are investing their dollars in AI. And
Mm,
I feel like you kind of have to go where the money is in terms of like, because that's where they're going to be hiring, right?
yeah.
So it's just more, I mean, it's just practical
Hmm.
advice, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Fear not. It's coming in your
Yeah,
role at some point.
totally.
Samantha, I'm going to ask you the big question.
Yeah.
How do you define success?
I had a lot of trouble thinking about this,
it's a
but
it's a
it's
it's a
a really big
doozy
one.
of a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, I think of success kind of like walking upstairs, and then periodically you look back and then you see how many steps you've climbed up. That's how I sort of think about my success. There's no like ultimate point where I feel like, okay, I've reached the top. I feel like life is kind of like it's like the staircase that you kind of have to keep going up. And then when you do look back, you're like, wow, look at what I've done so far.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's success.
Mhm.
I love the
I
visual.
totally, because you can
Mhm.
you can be happy and proud of yourself for where you're at. You can look up the stairs to know that there's more to go do and you're excited about that. And you can also look behind yourself to be proud of everything you've accomplished thus far. I really like that approach.
Yeah. And one of the things that like I feel like my younger self was not aware of is that there's a long trajectory of work,
Mm,
right?
Mhm.
Like I don't know why I thought that like I don't know. I I don't know why I thought that like in my mid 40s like I'd be done with work. No, no. Like I feel like myself I cannot live without being productive and investing myself intellectually and professionally. And so, I think that these last 21 years of working has felt so fast. And the next 21 years, I still have a lot of time and a lot more to learn until maybe I retire. Although sometimes I do wish that I was retired already, but like sit by the pool, like just hang out. Yeah. But I do think that like in, just the reality is I'll probably be working for, the next 20 years or so. And I want to make it I want to be impactful to my job, and I want to have a lot of like good experiences and want to be fulfilled in that way.
I have to remind myself that a lot of like, oh, you have so much time. Like you do not have to have it figured out right now, even though it seems like you feel like you have to have it figured out right now. It's such a good reminder. And I was thinking of this. Do you know what your Enneagram type is?
No.
Okay, we got to send you a quiz.
Okay.
And Sarah and I feel like are pretty good at sniffing out Enneagram types. And you essentially get associated with a number, and then the number tells you like what kind of person you are. So 3 is the achiever, 2 is the helper. Is that right, Sarah? And I'm a 3 and Sarah's a 2. So if that tells you kind of, and then I'm a 3 wing 2, so I lean kind of in the helper way, and she's a 2 wing 3, so she leans in the achiever way. And I feel like you would definitely be a 3. I'm just like, that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. I'll send you a quiz though. We're starting to ask our guests that more now because it's kind of like, I'm not into like astrology or astronomy. What is it called? Oh, as I give myself a thumbs up. But Enneagram types, definitely, it's like, ooh, that's a little bit more interesting to me.
That does sound very cool. I love that idea.
We'll have to, Sarah, we got to find a good quiz to send out to people.
Prior. Yep.
Yeah, maybe we can incorporate that quiz into our AI platform since we do have a quiz element.
Ooh,
perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Okay. I think we're going to head into some rapid fire questions, and I'm going to kick them off. So, Samantha, what is one thing you cannot live without during the workday?
Coffee, but now I can't drink coffee because it keeps me up. So I've been drinking Clever. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard about that.
Tell us about it.
So Clever is basically adaptogens, and like it's low caffeine. There's only like 35 milligrams of caffeine. So like it doesn't send you on a caffeine rush and then you crash in the afternoon. So it's a very smooth sort of like, but it's also very delicious. I love it.
Ooh, I'm going to have to do some research.
I know. I always love like beverages. What are people drinking?
Yeah. And you only need to add water. That's the only thing. And then you just mix it. And then it's like a little latte in the morning.
Easy.
Ooh, I like that.
Cool. We'll look into it. Next question. What's your favorite way to unwind after work?
I like a good meal and a good face mask.
Ooh. I've been wanting to try this new face mask that's like a collagen one that you're supposed to wear all night when you sleep.
Oh, yes. I think I have seen that, and it is very intriguing. Have you tried a red light mask?
Ooh, yes, I did mine this morning.
Nice.
She's going to whip it out.
Just do it while we're, podcasting. It'll be fine.
I know.
That would be a funny episode.
Scary. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Wow, I'm really liking these answers so far. What is the best benefit that you've ever had?
I guess travel. Through work, I've traveled a bunch to different places. I have gone to like the most random states, because I live in the Northeast. So like going to Alabama or Mississippi is like one of those places that you're like,
it's a different country.
Yeah. It's just, actually, funny story. So I went to Alabama and I wanted to find something to eat, but I didn't rent a car. I just Ubered. And I was like, okay, where is the nearest like restaurant that I could walk to? I went to the front desk and I was like, so can you tell me where I can eat? I don't have a car. And she's like, you don't have a car? She was so shocked. She's like, there is a McDonald's across the street. And I was like, okay, I'll just walk there. She's like, no, let me drive you. And I was like, but it's across the street.
Southern hospitality. Wanted to make sure you're taken care of.
Absolutely. Okay, last question. Biggest workplace pet peeve?
Oh, people who don't want to be there.
Ooh, that's a good one.
The people that bring you down.
Yeah. I like positive, good vibes only.
We're here for it. We are here
Yes.
for it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Samantha. It's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like this has flown by.
I
Yeah.
know. It was great chatting. I loved getting to know you both too.
Yes,
Thank
likewise. Thank you
you.
for spending
Yes.
your time with us.
Thank
Yes.
you so much.
And Sam has some exciting launches. So we'll make sure to include all the places that you can follow her and Look Sky and all of the exciting things that are heading into the fashion industry. I'm sure in 6 months' time it will look completely different. But everyone, enjoy your Monday. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next week.